Asa, welcome back to the show. I always say this when Asa does an episode, is that one of the first guests to appear, he agreed to do it not knowing who I was. The show was very young, and it was very funny the way we interacted. Like, go and listen to that episode. Aces have been like, what have I gotten myself into? But you quickly became part of the East is a Podcast classic lineup. So, original friend of the show, Asa Winstanley. I wish it was under better circumstances. I mean, we're laughing now about it, but how are you doing? That was very fucked up what happened.
Yes, it was. I'm fine. I'm okay. It was definitely a. It wasn't a surprise, but it was a shock. If you know what I mean. It was. Yeah, it's not very pleasant to be woken up before dawn by the cops banging down your door, and then taking away all your devices. And specifically telling me they wanted to take away my journalistic devices. So there was no ambiguity about it. It was targeting a journalist, and that's what they did. So yeah, that's where we are. This is where we are in Britain, 2024.
I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's open war against journalists. I mean, it's been open war in Gaza against journalists for a long time. But this naked act of like fascist repression. I mean, you write words. You're a word peddler. Like that's what you do. That's what we do in this business. All we have is words. It's like, I mean, Rafat, the beauty. I mean, the amazing martyrs. Like that's all I have is this like marker, and like all we have is like our keyboards and our laptops and these devices. There's no like magic to any of this. There's no ethereal power that we draw from. It's words. Why are they so afraid of words?
Well, what a good question. I mean, this is something I've been really struggling with since really the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, Sina. Like, what the hell are we even doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no, like, we're just saying words. We're writing words. We're saying words. We're speaking. We're tweeting. We're podcasting. We're streaming. We're doing anything we can to try and stop this genocide. And in my moments of despair and depression, I just think I'm not involved in trying to physically stop this in any way, like people in Palestine Action are. Like they're actually trying to physically dismantle the weapons in Britain. The Israeli weapons firms in Britain are actually trying to, and they're really taking severe risks. And these are really young. Most of them are really young people. And they're in, and we barely hear about it in the press, even in our press, independent press. They're in solitary confinement. They're being treated as if they're terrorists. It's insane. And at the end of the day, we are just talking about it, writing about it. And so I've really struggled with that. And in my moments of despair, I do sort of think to myself, what am I doing? This is it really making a difference? But clearly someone in authority in Britain thinks it's doing enough that it's worth shutting down. And it's not just me, it happened to Tony Greenstein, Mick Napier, Richard Medhurst, Sarah Wilkinson. And I think a lot of people now are asking themselves in Britain, who's going to be next? And it does remind me of dear Rifat, like what he one of his lectures that I know that you've seen as well, where he was talking to his students in Gaza, and he said, sometimes even we as people who even as Palestinians and as people who support the Palestinian cause, we fall into the trap of saying, well, I'm only a poet, I'm only a writer, I'm only a journalist, and I'm not really making a difference. It's not really resisting the Israeli violence. But it's not only, we should actually believe in the power of words to affect change. And if we didn't believe in that, ultimately we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But it's hard to see sometimes, the immediate circumstances and the desperate circumstances. As we're recording this, the Israelis have put out a hit list of Palestinian journalists, just they're openly doing it now, openly just declaring all these journalists they're going to kill them, they're going to assassinate them, um, and it's appalling. And Western journalists are really silent about it. Um, I did see that the National Union of Journalists has put out a statement condemning it today. Whether the actual media will write about it, I highly doubt it.
Condemning what happened to you, or or the hit list?
Oh, they did. Yes, the NUJ did put out a statement supporting me and saying that it's part of an increasing. Yeah, both. They've done both. So just before I came on this, I saw the NUJ had put out some sort of condemnation. I saw a tweet from a reputable source saying they'd done that, although I haven't read the full statement itself about the 6 Palestinian journalists. I believe they're all from. Are they all from Al Jazeera, or is it Al Jazeera and others? I can't remember. But
I
these,
think it was
these
Al
are
Jazeera
reputable
people. Yeah.
Okay, they're Palestinian correspondents. The last eyes and ears on the ground, basically, because so many of them have been killed already. These are the last few eyes and ears on the ground in northern Gaza, while the Israelis are carrying out their utter genocide, complete and final solution of northern Gaza. Um, sending in the Einsatzgruppen. That's where we're at now. Yeah, they have the union has condemned it. It's so it's a reminder. As bad as my experience was, I know that it's far worse for Palestinian journalists. And I put out a tweet because I have been like the silver lining to what happened to me, Zena, has been I've had such an outpouring of support. It's been quite emotional, actually. It's been amazing, and I've had some private messages from some quite surprising people, um, and yeah, because like I said, I think there is people in Britain now who are worried who's going to be next, and um, so the silver lining is this overwhelming support that I've had, and I genuinely can't respond to all these messages. And the number one thing people are saying to me is, people want to fundraise and replace my laptop and all that kind of stuff, but they're also saying, tell me what I can do to help. And I put out a tweet, I think yesterday or the day before, and I said, in due course, there will be things you can do to help, especially if this isn't the end of what the police are trying to do, because we can talk about that a bit more, but I don't know whether it's the beginning or whether it's the end. There will be things you can do in due course. However, meanwhile, the main thing you can do to help me is help Gaza. Do something about Gaza. And I had one response to that was like saying, oh, that's really selfless of you. And it's not really, like, it genuinely isn't. It's like I have a direct material interest in, I mean, aside from the fact that it's a genocide that we all want to see ended, if there's a ceasefire in Gaza tomorrow, the pressure on me would decrease, So, and I think that goes for all of us, So, like, that is, to me, is so emblematic of the fact that Palestine, well, I call my Substack Palestine is Still the Issue, named after John Pilger's 2 documentaries that he made on Palestine, and endorsed by John Pilger, the now late John Pilger, unfortunately. And Palestine is the global issue. It is the global issue. And it is all our, it's not just some slogan. All our freedoms are now deeply embedded in the Palestinian struggle, because it's the struggle for global liberation, and not just the struggle for liberation, not only the struggle for liberation in Palestine. All our liberations are embedded in Israel. The Zionist entity is the final result of centuries of Western genocide, settler colonialism, and holocausts all over the globe. This is the final result. This is the ultimate boss of it. And, all of us are in an existential struggle for our lives.
And yeah, I mean, there is a weird sort of dialectical thing at play. Like, I understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, words are important. The fact that they came after you so brazenly. I mean, to send 10, where they were uniformed, right?
They were plain clothes, but I mean, it's not like they were undercover. It's not like they were undercover. You could tell they were cops. You know, they had stab vests and probably CS spray, and they did have handcuffs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's because
these are like
yes,
they're
these
sort
are
of
like the gourmet squad of cops. This is not like this.
yeah.
They sent like upper echelon goon squad to come and bully you for a morning and to just rattle your cage. And I mean, there are material things they are doing. Like they are obviously the devices is like the first step because they like information, and information is one of their precious domains of control. And in fact, like that's what this was about. I mean, that's what all these psychotic, genocidal Zionist media goons. That's what their work is about. Like, I mean, just to think at the beginning of this, they were paying far right Zio fascists in the US and in the UK and Canada were paying to have your kids' names broadcasts across the world to like name and shame the like activists in like schools, right? Like they're directly attacking these institutions, these elite institutions, the students of them, right? And doing so with and I mean, at my alma mater, UCLA, these kids almost got murdered on the front lawn while cops are standing around watching like this. They're like getting almost murdered, like with boards on their heads, defenseless. They have nothing to defend themselves, just shields, right? Like even with like, and they're like behaving heroically. So I think about the fact that yeah, like words and like the fetishization of journalists and students and activists that liberalism has like inculcated in us. I've seen the like weaponization of that, and so have you, obviously, in like the just never ending stream of color revolution attempts from not just like Middle East stuff but around the world. And you see the patterns, and then you see the certain kinds of media heroes that the liberal mainstream corporate press here celebrate. So that's almost always entirely in enemy countries. And there's like that the machinery of liberal journalism has marched in step with power for a long time. I think of historically of the fact that journalism was birthed by by like figures who were critical of power, like people like Karl fucking Marx, by the way, founding father of like this profession that we're doing, right? And now we have Anderson Cooper and like all these like embedded assets. I mean, it's even more advanced than that. I mean, they sent Christian Amanpour to threaten Bashar al-Assad. I mean, that's where we're at under the cover of a CNN interview. But if you watch it, there's like a threat. They say, "Oh, they're talking about sending goons into your country. Like they're going to do it." What do you think of that, Mr. Assad? She's married to a State Department guy or her ex or something. This is clearly a form of communication between states that journalists are used. And so I think of the fact that if anything is true in this world, it's the fact that Palestinians in Gaza, the most besieged colonized or like anti-colonial force in this world, they are carrying the torch of liberal humanist journalism right now. They are the steadfast believers in the task of journalism, which is to hold power to account, which is to bear witness to the crimes of any regime, let alone like in this case it's the Zionist American regime. But ultimately it's their task to hold steadfast and record and publish those crimes. And our job, I feel, primarily, and EI does this probably no better than anybody else on the planet, not in Palestine, is amplifying that and like professionalizing it, placing it on a media, having and I mean and this attack on you is an attack on EI. I mean, this is the first shot across the bow, maybe, in terms of like the legal stuff, to my knowledge. I don't think any of you have had this happen to you yet. So, and I know that YouTube did take down EI for like for like a week or something, or 24 hours. Like these are the first shots. Yeah, like this is the first shots. Like they will not allow us to keep doing our jobs if it keeps getting worse. And it is getting worse. So this is as much an interview for myself and my own work as it is like, to say to you, like, man, that's fucked up what they did. And I'm sorry you had to like sacrifice that. But like, I just think like one day they'll come here, like they'll come to my house, be like, and like my dog will be barking. Like, what will they do? I mean, Canadian government doesn't have the same it's not unfolding. The fascist response to the Al-Aqsa flood isn't unfolding in the same way all around the world. Obviously, it's unfolding first and foremost against Palestinians, but and then secondly, Lebanese, Yemenis, and Iraqis, and then it's trickling down to us in the form of like legalized state violence. And that's what you experienced, obviously, and that's what a lot of people are experiencing. And yet, and so I wonder about the escalation of this. Obviously, you've probably thought about this. And was there any communication with you about like, there's, like what that like what is their intention? I would say that you're thinking is it just a flex on you, or is this the first step, or both? Because that could be the first step.
Yeah, this is the great unknown right now, Sina. I mean, it's only, as we're filming this, it's only a week after it happened, 7 days, and yeah, this is what I don't know. Like, all these thoughts go through your head, and again, this is familiar to me from reporting on this happening to others, to people in Palestine Action, to Tony Greenstein, who is, a relatively well-known Jewish anti-Zionist in Britain who has a very active blog, and he's a very acerbic poster on social media. But he's also a published author. He's written a very good book about, it's called Zionism During the Holocaust. It's about the collusion of the Zionist movement in Europe in the run-up to and even during the Nazi Holocaust, of the Jews and others in World War II Europe and immediately before World War II. It's a very good book, and it's a very comprehensive book. It's really the first book on the subject since Lenny Brenner's book of the 1980s. So Tony's a very similar things happened to him. He was actually arrested, and he had all his devices taken, and they actually, I didn't have any bail conditions imposed on me. They banned him from posting to Twitter, and I think there was other stipulations as well. He got that overturned though with his lawyers, because these stipulations blatantly illegal. Mick Napier, who is probably certainly one of the most important organizers of the Palestine Solidarity movement in Scotland. He's one of the founders of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They actually banned him from Glasgow city centre, the city he grew up in, where demonstrations take place, and they've been really going after him for many, many years through the courts. Similar things happened to him. Again, he beat these bail conditions. And so, the fact that there's been successful resistance against these bail conditions I don't know for sure, but it may have been the reason why they didn't bother arresting me. It may have also been my position as a journalist, which is, is very well established. I think that I don't know is the reality. I don't know. So what all these people, and especially people in Palestine Action, activists in Palestine Action, who have been arrested or detained and then or briefly arrested and de-arrested, or they've had their homes raided and devices stolen, property stolen. One of the founders, Richard Barnard, they're carrying on a case against him now. They are actually saying that he, at one point, they stole his passport. I'm not sure whether it was returned to him or not. So part of the effect and part of the damaging and chilling effect of all this is that they keep it hanging over your head, the possibility that they could charge you with something in the future. And so it's an implicit threat that you better back off what you're doing. And I've said this on in other outlets. It reminds me of it's very Israeli. It's a very Israeli tactic. It's what the Israelis do in the West Bank when they're going after Palestinian activists. During my time in the International Solidarity Movement, this is what the Palestinian activists of protest organizers and so forth would tell us that they do. They raid their homes. I saw it happen. I saw the immediate aftermath of homes being smashed up, literally smashed up to pieces by Israeli army thugs, just ransacking all the drawers, just sheer vandalism now, as we see now, just in Gaza, as we've seen for the last year. It's not new. It's not new. Like, it's been going on for decades, for the last century, really. But now it's more widely known. We've got the Israeli genocidaires have got the technological means to film themselves doing this and be proud of it. So this, they'll drag these and this is obviously, I'm talking about non-violent organizers. Like, I was never a reporter on what I'm not, except from a distance over the internet, where I've commented on the reality of what the Palestinian resistance does. I never met any fighters or anything like that. So, to my knowledge, anyway. So these were non-violent organizers, right? These were people involved in protests against the wall and stuff like that, and they would drag them through the military courts, and they would do all kinds of persecutions and raids on them, and then they would keep these cases hanging over their heads, and sort of as a threat that they could face these cases in the future. And those are the technique. I'm not saying it's come from the Israelis, but the British are using the same British police are using the same strategies now. And I don't know whether this is the beginning, whether it's the end and it's just a intimidation tactic like with the others, or it's the beginning of something. It could be a test case for whether they can go after journalists, because like, what's important to know about, you asked about the police, like, being that they weren't a PC plod, as it were. This is what's called the Counterterrorism Command. They are
this is mukhabarat level of, like,
yeah,
this is
it's
not.
mukhabarat. They're secret police. They are Britain's secret police. They're not MI5, but they report directly to MI5. So this is very, very serious.
I know you wonder, like, so I've been thinking about this too. I was thinking, like, what is power today? Like, what is, I was telling you off camera, I've been reading this book about 1688. This is a horrible admission. I'm still, after all these years of hating the UK, I'm still, unfortunately, quite the Anglophile. And, like, if you leave me to my devices, I'll return to these scenes of history that, like, I've studied in the past, but, like, I didn't do a good enough job in grad school to, like, really dig into, because I was, like, kind of looking for stuff and just mired in dumb literature stuff. Not that literature's dumb, but whatever. Like, in the sense that, like, I'm now, and so one of these things that I've been digging into is, like, 1688, Cromwell, like, these stories of, the birth, because there's a lot of, for people who don't know, Glorious Revolution, go look it up, whatever. It's whatever. The mythology around it is what I'm thinking about, which is, this is like the birthplace of a kind of democracy. Like, they killed the king, they put in a new parliament or whatever, and, like, this was an attempt to break the divine sovereignty of God, of the king, in the sense that, oh, this is imbued in this person, and the fact they just cut his head off. So it was like a French Revolution moment, but 100 years earlier, in the UK. And it's, well, back then it was whatever, England, Great Britain, or whatever. So, like, this was a landmark moment in the history of the West and democracy, and also something else, which is the state, right? Because the state as an apparatus, you can say, in this traditional kind of story of 1688, was secularized, right? So that there was a degree of, like, cliche thing that, like, liberals say today is, like, oh, the separation of church and state, right? Which really means, it means the secularization of the state. And what that in
Yeah,
practice
the end
means,
of the divine right
yes,
of kings, right?
but when practice, what it means is the the proliferation of a class of workers and bureaucrats and functionaries, and at like a certain very basic point, like fundamental point, I mean basic, at a base of it is the violence apparatus. And that violence apparatus needs to be secularized in the name of the state, not just to defend the king. Kings are human fallible creatures, obviously. You have to defend against your posture against defending against, like, defending sovereignty. You're defending a state. So in some ways, like, you got a taste of, like, the deep stick that the state has over all of us. At the end of the day, like, the threat of violence is the sovereign power of the state over you. And that violence can be secularized in the sense that, oh, it's not going to kill you in the way it did in the 18th century. It's just going to jail you for 30, 40, 50, like Leonard Peltier, 50 years, like 5 decades. They're just jailing the guy because they want to, because it's fun, because they want to flex, because it's like a beef that they have with this one guy. Or they did that to tons of Black Panther guys. They would release them 3 days before they're dead just to avoid paperwork of having them die in prison. Like, it's the cruelest, most psychotic, fascist thing you could ever cook up. Right. And it's practiced by our dear human rights loving democratic societies. Right. That they love journalism. They love, like, Penn. They love, they host journalists that they have question and answer session. They have all of these rituals of democratic, and like the fifth estate or whatever. Which one is the fifth? I never remember the estates of the realm. The media is the fifth estate, right? Or is it the fourth estate? Fourth is that. Who
I
cares?
think
It
it's a
doesn't
fourth
matter.
estate.
Yeah, but like, this is the idea that this is this pillar, but whenever they want to, whenever they feel like it, whenever they feel threatened, they just smash it. They smash that pillar. They don't care. Like, they'll just jail you. They don't give a shit. There's nothing sacred about this stuff.
Yeah, the Zionist entity is really heightened these contradictions, and we're at the moment, and especially in the last year, like, this process has really accelerated, where we're seeing all these Western nations which flaunt for the last few hundred years have flaunted their power around the globe and have preached and continue to preach freedom, democracy, secularism, supposed secularism, but actually, it's been, especially in the case of the British Empire, has been quite religious. All these values they've tried to impose on the rest of the globe, cynically, and not actually, carrying it out for the people who live in those countries, but dominating and controlling the indigenous people around the world. The same countries that claim to be these beacons of freedom and democracy are gradually dismantling their own institutions. What democratic institutions, what that they have left, that haven't been eroded by the power of corporations, or at least not completely eroded and destroyed by the power of corporations. They are now dismantling them all, slowly but surely, primarily in the name of defending the last outpost of, okay, well, not the last outpost, but the last, I don't know how to express it, but the last ongoing and
Audacious.
the most audacious, yes, the most audacious example of the settler colonial project, let's say, yeah, remaining, the last incomplete, perhaps you could say. Although I guess these processes are never fully complete. There's no final victory, and there's no final defeat. There's just struggle. But yeah, audacious is a good way to say it. So-called Israel is the last example of the sheer bleeding edge, I suppose, of the settler colonial project, of the sort of just, as Joseph Massad calls it, the collective West. That Israel has just become the guiding light for this unvarnished, un you know, undisguised sheer Western power, and just the sheer genocidal nature of it. All of these processes over centuries have now finally resulted in the unmasked genocide of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and it's a kind of last stand for that project. And there, it's really become that stark. It's really become that stark, and this is where we are. And Israel, has led Western nations to really starts to dismantle the concept of even of free speech, as flawed as it always was. It's becoming increasingly hard to be able to express yourself in any way. I mean, look at what's happening in Germany. Britain is now seems to be heading the way of Germany. All of these European countries, especially, the United and Canada, Australia, um, the settler colonies, and the European countries which originated those settler colonies are all they're kind of they're taking the lead of Israel. They're taking the defense of Israel to the defense of Israeli apartheid, of an Israeli Holocaust of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They're going all out in the defense of that, and they are really
the
damaging their
detriments of
own
their own political
societies.
careers too. To like, it's to the it's not actually like like Harris is going to lose if she had done even a
It's starting to
modicum
look
of
like that.
performative action against Netanyahu, even a little bit. It would have worked. It probably would have worked. Americans are that dumb, and they'll fall for anything. They'll throw. I think there's just like a patheticness to a lot of American voters. Not some notable groups, but I would say that on the whole they could have done even a performative thing, and they chose not to, because the investment in genociding Palestinians goes to something very basic in the operation of the Western settler colonial states. And so I guess in some ways our job as the few who actually talk about this in a sustained and public and platformed way, who work to like network together, critics and thinkers and writers who operate in the minority. I mean, this is the thing. Like, we are in the minority. The journalistic profession that we are, like, you're much more of a card carrying member than I have. I never considered myself a journalist. There's like a new layer of news culture which podcasts obviously reside in, and a lot of journalists are part of it. But ultimately, I don't see myself as a journalist, but I do see myself as like a platformer. And I know that we are the minority. The majority of the professionals working in the news media today, and also intellectual sphere, cultural sphere, whatever you want to call it, the infosphere, they are just looking away. Like, it's like that meme, like, what genocide? Right? Like, that's what they're all saying. And yeah, sure, there are examples inside of each one of those things, the orgs. I mean, but I think as a whole, this class is intensely policed. There is a lot of policing of who gets in. There's a lot of policing of people once they are in. And so they are make sure, like, even their treasured places of universities, like the elite universities, they were happy to go to war and ruin those spaces. They are hurting these universities, and the universities don't care. It's more important to protect their precious little project. Now, this is the interesting part of all this, is that the role of the US specifically in all of this, because it's important to remember that, like, the UK, like the country of the United Kingdom, it is a vassal state. If you don't believe me, like, read this book. It's called Vassal State. It's like came out like a year ago. It's about how, like, the US dominates the UK economically, politically, right? So sovereignty is gone for most of these Western liberal democracies. I mean, yeah, like the elites who run those countries, ostensibly, who run the, like, let's say, deep states of those countries, sure, they have a kind of kind of personal autonomy, maybe, sure, okay, like Justin Trudeau has legal power in Canada. But we all know at the very core of it is that the US holds like economic power, which is the only thing these people worship at the end of the day. That, like, that's their primary job, is to be like a lever of economic control. So, like, they're all following the lead of crazy US. Like, it's like they're lemmings jumping off this cliff.
Yeah, economic control and also military control. Like Britain is very much a vassal state. Like it's and it always. I mean, it has been since World War Two. The whole Cold War domination of Britain, military and intelligence control of Britain. Britain is not a sovereign state. America has that control. Like, just an example there, if you look at military bases around Britain, primarily air force bases, um, there's several in the east of the country. If you look on the sort of eastern hump of Britain, of England, where the Anglias are, where the Anglo-Saxon invasion began, actually. The
Ground zero of whiteness, as I like to call it.
yeah, ground zero of whiteness. There was it's a very geographically, it's a very flat area when you're driving around it. It's perfect for Air Force bases. Well, the Air Force bases in the area are called RAF, whatever, RAF Fairford and so forth, as in Royal Air Force. But if you go into those bases, they're little American towns. They're American. They're on paper they're British Air Force bases, but they're actually American Air Force bases. And I remember during the Iraq War, there was efforts to not only protest against those bases, but to actually try and sabotage the bombers that were taken off to bomb Iraq. And I attempted to be involved in some of those protests, non-violent protests, and I was stopped from going. It was a crazy situation, actually. If you Google Fairford coaches, you might still find an indie media posts about it, because there was a big court case because I don't know how they got intelligence on it. It wasn't like super secret. You could, we these activist groups had organized coaches to get to the protest. This was back in 2000. I was either 2002 or 2003. I can't remember now. And the coaches we were in were pulled off the motorway. We were effectively kidnapped by the police, and then they made us all get back on the coach, and then they escorted us back to London. It was pretty wild. Anyway, long story short, we got a wrongful detention case against the police for that, and they had to pay out more than $1 million. I got a modest sum of money myself, but yeah, like it's eye-opening once you consider the reality of the situation in Britain. Like, it's not a sovereign state, and it's even less of a sovereign state now than it was during the Cold War. Because I think my view, and I've written about this to an extent in my book, Weaponising Anti-Semitism, how the Israel lobby brought down Jeremy Corbyn. There is what the musician and researcher Loki calls the tripartite security state, which has formed in recent years, which is the US, Israel, and Britain. And my view is that the British state, the aspects of the British state, very high-powered aspects of the British state, and even aspects of the British deep state, have been infiltrated by the Israeli intelligence agencies, acting through their proxy organizations, primarily the pro-Israel lobby, Zionist groups, and so forth. And it's reached a stage now where the Britain is such a declining former imperial power that it's actually a vassal to a vassal. That there's a hierarchy of the United States, then Israel, and then Britain. It's starting to. I'm not saying it's in full control, but it's certainly in control of its policies on Palestine. And these infiltrations. I mean, who knows what's going on inside these kind of powerful deep state entities? But there are indications that it's likely contested, but it seems to be increasing year by year, and it's only gotten worse, in my view, with the Labour government, which came to power in July, because the Labour Party was so thoroughly infiltrated by assets of the Israeli state that even more than the Conservative Party, although both of the main parties are really controlled by the pro-Israel lobby, and and in my case as well, it does make you wonder if there was an element of just simple revenge for my book, revenge for my reporting, now that the Labour Party is in power. But we don't know, because they wouldn't. This was one of the things as well, that the police on the night, they wouldn't say to me, they wouldn't explain why they were doing what they were doing. The senior officer, Anthony Mortimer, he would only say that it was to do with social media posts that I'd made. They wouldn't specify which ones. So Yeah, this is where we are. It's journalism.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, this is like, they got so mad at your wordy words. They sent in 10 of their top echelon goons. Like, it's so, like, they got so, like, it's like Facebook losing its mind and like banning the red triangle. How dare you use this red triangle? How dare you commit this thought crime? Like, this is, I don't know. Yeah, like, this is the funniest. I don't know. I mean, I know it's macabre to laugh about this, but it's the only way that I can stay sane is that the US, like, the US has this massive global network of underlings, like a mafia, right? And it uses, and those are states. Those are like fully fleshed out, elaborate states with hundreds of thousands of, like, people who are just with the violence apparatus, let alone the bureaucracy. And they all ultimately like fall under like the authority of this like aging goon in the White House, like in a country far flung, which, like, which Britain helped birth, right? Which is the funniest, like the funniest aspect of this is like the terrible bastard child of Europe has now decided it's going to stomp and destroy the entire continent in its like futile effort to like slow its decline. And like, and the various sort of theaters of this decline that we're watching Ukraine. I mean, we haven't even talked about Ukraine in all of this. Is that because these are twinned wars in a sense, because like these are wars of, I think one was planned and one wasn't, right? Like, they planned the Ukraine war was part of the plan, and the Gaza Holocaust wasn't. And now that they're like flailing, trying to like, to do the Wizard of Oz thing, like behind the curtain, right? Like, it needs to pull its countries under its boot and show and have them show, right, like that they're loyal client states, which is like how the US operates. I mean, like you pointed out, that these military bases dressed up as British bases, right? Like, who do you think like makes the planes that these bases host, right? Like, they take money, they force these governments to buy this stupid expensive hardware as a form of like levy, right? It's a levy between states. They call it like military purchase, but really it's a form of, you are our vassal, you have to pay us for our protection, right? And so it's, the fact that the UK thinks that it's like the big talk. I mean, I don't know if the UK actually
It's
thinks it's the big
tribute.
talk though. Yeah, like, it's tribute. Yeah, it's a mafia state, and they sent its goons to your door because of your wordy words. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where I mean, we haven't even also think about the energy crisis and all of this. Think about the fact that the US de-developed its allies economically, right? Germany used to be an industrial power because of cheap Russian energy. Now they are no longer an industrial power. They have been de-industrialized. Like, and another country, by the way, which has tens of thousands of US troops, which doesn't have sovereignty, right? Like, Jeremy Corbyn's rise and like very depressing fall is a study in attempt at sovereignty. This guy tried to break away. He threatened to break away from the consensus, the core consensus, their security foreign policy consensus, which is petrodollar, which is the American system, right? Petrodollar is the backbone of US dollar. US just pushes a button somewhere in the treasury. It says, we create dollars, and then it sells it to the rest of the world for this amazing stuff and people, and they get nothing in return but numbers on a screen somewhere, right? This is the basis of the American system, and what keeps it going is the petrodollar, right? And so obviously that system, born from World War II, born from the beginning of the Cold War, and also the consolidation of the collapse of the European empires, right? Like you watch movies from the US from the 80s in London, like this was like a depleted, like non-existent city. Like, I watched Withnail and Isle the other day, and I was like, this is London? That's what London looked like? And that was like the 80s, right? So like they were de-developed in this post-war period. There was like economic decline, and to this day, like the UK economy is just like a stand-in.
Yeah, my dad grew up in the early 1950s, and he always tells me how they were still rationing when he was a boy, so it was that's the origin of the word, austerity in a political context in Britain,
I didn't know
was
that.
there was austerity. Yeah, and it was very grey. It was a very grey sort of Britain, and there was, the only thing that did lead to the sort of rise of the what's Lenin's phrase about the privileged workers in the West? I forget the term now. Labor aristocracy. Yeah, the rise of the labor aristocracy in the 40s and the 50s was because of the massive influx of American capital. The millions and millions they put into Western Europe in order to kind of stem what they saw as the threat of communism, communist influence, and so forth. There was but of course it came at the price of sovereignty, and it wasn't only Britain. We saw it happening all over Europe, and it was contested in places like Italy, especially France, and that's why they did Operation Gladio. Which is a whole other discussion. It's an issue that I have written about, and I know we've talked about before. But yeah, there's a whole continuity to all this history.
I guess I wonder how your this is going to affect your work. I know they didn't put any conditions on you. They didn't this time, at least. But I wonder, the I'm sure the mental aspect of all this is always there, because you write a word and you're like, is this the word that does me in? Like, I know it's not a conscious thing, but I'm sure in the back of our minds, like, it operates. And how what do you tell yourself in all of this? Like, what's your reading of how to go forward?
Yeah, you're right. It's difficult. I mean, at the moment, it is quite conscious. Like I am being careful in everything I say. It does have a chilling effect on my speech. There's no doubt about that. However, I've always written everything I've written, including in private emails, by the way, with the capabilities of the deep state in mind. That the reality is that they would use anything against me that they could, and against any of us that they could, and that has an effect. But ultimately, I just have to reassure myself that I just have to carry on with the same path. I have to carry on with what I'm doing. I have to carry on using the same principles of truth and accuracy in journalism, reporting on a people's just struggle to be free from oppression, and that it's as simple and as complicated as that, essentially. Um, and just carry on with that. That's what I'm doing, and you know, we keep going. We keep going. We take these blows, and we learn the lessons from them, and we rebuild back. And you know, we are thankful that we are not killed and assassinated like our dear friend Rifat, um, like the Palestinian journalists who are currently being targeted for murder by the Zionist entity, like the Lebanese journalists who just had their entire office block bombed, Al Mayadeen. Um,
And nary a tear from our Western press. Nothing. Silence. Can you
Nothing.
believe?
We
I
only
just
read about
yeah,
it on
like,
social media.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
But I mean, look, I know it's a cliche to say, but it's true. Like, I hope you wear this as a badge. Like, they sent,
yeah.
like, that we say it out loud, and we're like, and it's like, it's funny almost that it's like so crazy. They sent 10 goons to get your devices when they probably already had the information on those devices anyways. Like, they have access to every data, every morsel of data you fling into the world, they access it. Okay, 15 years ago, WikiLeaks exposed that they can use microphones on your TV to surveil you if they want. Okay, so let's just, everyone who's listening to this, I'm sure you're all, this, you're not naive goons, that we have no privacy in this era. And in fact, the internet was was like dreamed up by American military psycho freaks who dream of this stuff. Like, this is the tool. We hand them this information and we do it knowingly. So that for them to send 10 guys, I mean, like, does your apartment even fit 10 full grown adults? Like, does it even, like, could they even come through the door all? Like, it's like a scene of like
Yeah, I
clowns
mean,
into a car. That's all I'm picturing. Like, they came in one car, they kept coming, like Agent Malone, Agent Smith, Agent Roberts. Like, it's like the Matrix almost. Like, you think, like, what are you looking for? He has like 4 computers. You could have wrapped this up in 10 minutes. You could have sent PC Constable fish and chips to get this stuff. You didn't need the gourmet squad. Like, what are you doing, bangers, beans, and mash boys? Like, enjoy, go fuck. But if you realize, like, this performance, like that's what they wanted you to tweet about it. They want the people to know that they did this, because performance of power in a place is like half of their job. Like, they need to perform and flex on people to remind them that you live under our sovereignty, that your wordy words, like, they come into our ears and we decide, like, when, when you get the stick, right? There's no carrots, right? It's just stick with these people. And, like, yeah, you think of all of the people, the thousands of people languishing languishing in hellholes, like fucking Guantanamo. They have a whole fucking concentration camp for their terrorism arrestees, right? Which half of them are probably going to be turned into assets and like set loose on whatever, right? It's a dark, dark game. And it's, I would say at the end of all this, though, you should wear this as a badge. I would, like, you should be proud that these fuckers came after you with such like desperate, like with such intense zeal. I mean, I know it's like I didn't go through it and I live, peacefully, but like I would wear it as a badge.
yeah, no, you're right. And a friend of mine called me the other day and said, you don't know. Looking back on this in the future, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you in terms of your journalism. And the outpouring of support has been astonishing. Um, it, it's I really like the point you made about it being all stick and no carrot. And it used to be the case that, Britain did have a very substantial carrot in the form of the welfare state, the NHS, cradle to the grave. That's what my parents' generation were promised by their parents' generation, was after World War II, you'd be taken care of from the cradle to the grave. And that was the reality, and this is what Lenin was talking about when he said there was a labor aristocracy, because people in Britain did have working class people in Britain, that is to say, had very substantial improvement in their material conditions after World War II because they demanded it. But they were also bamboozled and, into, I don't want to just say only bamboozled, but for whatever reasons and processes, um, Britain continued its imperial role, and as it declined as an independent empire, handed off those roles to the newly emerging and newly dominant US empire, and the material benefits for that British working classes benefited from, and in other countries in Western Europe as well, um, were directly funded by funded and it was a consequences of the imperial looting of the so-called third world, the global south, and British imperial domination around the globe. And of course the British Empire, it was the British Empire who um, really originated Israel ideologically as well. We talk about Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism now is obviously a very important political force in America, especially on the evangelical right. But the Christian Zionists were, at the time of the Balfour Declaration, were literally the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, and other ministers of state. And ironically, now when you look back on it, they had one Jewish minister in the cabinet at the time of the Balfour Declaration. I believe his name was Lord Montague, if I'm remembering correctly, and he was really the only one who objected to it, and he outlined his objections to it in terms of how it would actually be detrimental to the rights of the Jewish community in Britain, as well as to the rights of the Palestinian people, who at the time they were understanding as only as Arabs. But be that as it may, now the carrot has gone, right? Keir Starmer, what carrot is Keir Starmer giving to the British population? Nothing. Like all we've got to look forward to is the dismantlement of the slow dismantling of the NHS. All these austerity policies they're carrying on with them, and really, the failure of the Corbynist project is such a tragedy, because it wasn't. If you it could well be in years to come that the British establishment looks back on their political assassination of Jeremy Corbyn as a great mistake for them in the long term, because there's no strategic thinking happening in any of this. Again, it's all very Israeli. The Israelis are not doing strategic thinking. They're only reacting and killing. The British deep state, the British power, British political powers, British institutions are not doing strategic thinking. They're only lashing out. They're not thinking. They're only thinking, well, we're going to fuck up Asa Winstanley. We're going to fuck up Richard Medhurst, and so on and so forth. They're only thinking in the short term, well, that it's going to stop them doing what they're doing. They're not thinking strategically of the outrage that is going to be caused by people who have their eyes awakened, and it's going to, just like one example of that is that my last article that I did about the Hannibal Directive, about how it was Israel itself who killed many of the Israeli civilians on 7th of October 2023, and not the Palestinian armed groups. That article went viral again after the news of my raid became public, so later in the day. So, they're flailing. It's like you said, it's a sort of, it is as difficult as it is in the short term. It's a badge of pride that they would go after me, and it's a vote of confidence in the power of the written word, as I know Rifat would say. I know Rifat would have been so proud.
Thank you, Asa. And you're right. Rifat, I think Rifat would be proud of EI for how much they've done in all this. EI is like a beacon for all of us. And it's always been that way. It's always been that way for me. I mean, I had Ali on the show, and I was like, I was reading EI from my dorm bedroom, like from my dorm room in like college when I was like 21, and I'm still doing it. I'm still getting up. I check EI, you know what I mean? So like to have an institution like EI, and for what you guys do, and I think this obviously was an attack on EI because of what you do, and also an attack on you because of what you do specifically. So take it as a badge that you're doing something right. And stay strong.
Yeah, I was reading EI when I was a volunteer in the ISM in the West Bank, doing media work for the group. I was reading EI then, and like we would alternate between original content, as we would call it now, although that word wasn't really a thing back then. This was in the sort of mid 2000s, and people would the volunteers would do original. They would call them human rights reports, but they were human rights reports. They were sort of short reports of what was happening on the ground to Palestinians and things like that. So we would do original content, but we'd also republish articles and repost articles. And I remember reading EI then and sort of saying, "Oh, this article is really good. We should repost this." And like the discussion within the group was that, like, well, yeah, we could do that, but we have to moderate between original stuff and reposting. And the problem with EI is, like, it's so good that we could just basically repost everything. So we have to sort of balance that. But yeah, EI, it's unusual because it's like more than 20. What is it, like 25 years old now as a website? It's like it's ancient in internet terms.
Yeah, and it survived. I mean, look, they chased Karl Marx out of Belgium, out of France. Like they chased him because of his journalism, first and foremost, right? Like they didn't give a shit about capital. They didn't give a shit about like theories of, surplus value. Like they care about journalism because I don't know, information scares them. I know it's liberal to say this, but it really does scare them when it's not under their constant framing, like their narrative master, their narrative master, whatever, like that narrative, like that is not something that they can handle. And the fact that there is this group of, you know, 10 or 15 individuals networked through Electronic Intifada that scares them so desperately that it's one outlet doing actual journalism in a sea of, like useless genocidal normies keeping silence or actively helping the genociders by running some kind of interference, by insulting the legacy of Yahya Sinwar, like I saw yesterday, like all kinds of clowns, all kinds of, like, this is what they prepared for, when they built up these armies of asset journalists that they've been doing for decades and decades, because they correctly realized that this was a realm that they needed to have a foothold in. I'm talking about, the deep states of all these countries that we live in, that it's better to have a controlled opposition than to have this like ragtag band of loons who actually call them out for what they do. That they kept them, and they made it easier for corporate controls, which is the same class of people, the owners of which are the same class of people that the politicians work for. Like they made it easier for them to acquire all these newspapers. They disappeared, right? And so then the internet came along and they try to control it as much as they can, but there are these outlets still, and we rely on places like EI. EI is our guiding light, for people like me, So I would say, and the heroism of a guy like Abu Bakr, right, will never reach the daylight of the Oscars. They'll never do a documentary about about Abu Bakr the way they did for the fucking white helmets. By the way, but it doesn't matter. We don't need their validation, right? Like I always quote, Leonard, what's his name? I want to say Leonard Maltin. It's not Leonard Maltin. Who's the guy who died? Leonard Cohen. It's like, we are ugly, but we have the music. And this is where the music happens. The EI is where the music happens. So I thank you. I thank the team at AI, and stay strong, man. Like this is, we're going to buckle up and enjoy this ride as far as it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we will, they'll have to drag us off the air. They'll have to drag us off the internet. So we will keep doing what we're doing. And I now, we're all very proud of you as well, Sina, and we enjoy the show and always listen to it. And we know that you will keep going on and doing what you're doing. And I do have a laptop now, but before I got one, I started drafting my next article by hand. So that is how determined I am to keep going. So they won't stop us so easily.
I will, if they kick me off the internet, I will record my shows with people, and then I will send them by USB stick on pigeons if I have to.
Yes.
I don't care. They will not
Yes.
stop me. You ass monkeys. You will not stop me. Stop me. Come and stop me. Get me kicked off every platform. I'll invent new ones. Like, you're not going anywhere. So I may delete this because I don't want to give them any ideas, but that's okay. Thank you. Ooh, only the diehard people stay this long. But I guess thank you, man. I'm going to stop here before we say anything else incriminating. Thanks, thank you, Asa.